Good morning everyone. I hope you are utilizing your study time in a right path. Now we are going to discuss about human anatomy and physiology. A chapter at a glance. What is that chapter? The system in our body that helps for movement of body parts, to maintain our body posture, to change our place from one place to another place. Can you guess what is that chapter? Yes, you are correct. Locomotion and movement. This chapter you can conclude very easily with the help of diagrams, except a few points. First of all, what are the various topics in this chapter? Let us go through NCERT content, followed by how can we decide to recollect the entire content in simple format with the help of diagrams, some simple comparative tables, etc. Let us see what are the topics in this chapter. This is related to what is locomotion, what is movement, followed by types of movements exhibited by body cells in our body, followed by muscle. You know muscles in our body, three types: skeletal muscles, visceral muscles and cardiac muscles. This chapter is related to skeletal muscle because skeletal muscles play an important role in locomotion. What about structure of muscle, muscle fiber, myofibril, myofilaments, etc. Followed by contraction of muscle, mechanism of muscle contraction, followed by muscle relaxation. Next topic, skeletal system in our body, followed by joints. Finally, disorders of muscular and skeletal system. This entire topic can be concluded very easily by dividing that content into different divisions. The entire chapter can be divided into 3 divisions. By that, we can recollect very easily the topics at a glance in the entire chapter, that is first division. Under each topic, what are the various diagrams, related points, related examples. And third division is the previous NEET entrance questions. Let us see the first division, the topics in the chapter. Types of movement, types of muscles, skeletal muscle, mechanism of muscle contraction, red fibers and white fibers, skeletal system, joints and disorders of muscular and skeletal system. All these topics can be recollected within less time. Okay, what are the various ways to recollect almost all points under each topic? First topic, types of movement. In our body, different cells show different movements. Amoeboid movement, ciliary movement and muscular movement. Which cells show amoeboid movement in our body? Macrophages of connective tissues, leukocytes of blood. These cells show amoeboid movement with the help of pseudopodia and microfilaments. You know, microfilaments are the cytoskeletal structures. Pseudopodia and microfilaments involving amoeboid movement. Ciliary movement. Ciliary movement is exhibited by ciliated cells which are present in the form of ciliated epithelium in our body. The ciliated epithelium forms lining of different structures such as trachea, fallopian tubes, etc. Due to movement of cilia, foreign particles in our trachea are driven towards throat. As they bend towards one direction, the foreign particles are driven towards throat to remove from our respiratory tract. Cilia in fallopian tube bend in one direction. That bending of cilia in one direction facilitates the movement of gametes. This is ciliary movement. Muscular movement. Muscular movement exhibited by muscles. Let us consider muscles of limbs, jaws, tongue, etc. show the muscular movements. Those muscles are skeletal muscles. You know, muscles in limbs, jaws and tongue are the examples of skeletal muscles. These are the three types of movements and related examples. Next topic, types of muscles. You know well, in our body there are three types of muscles: skeletal muscles, visceral muscles and cardiac muscles. All the three types of muscles and related points can be recollected by making simple comparative table. Skeletal muscles, visceral muscles, cardiac muscles. Regarding the characteristic feature of these three types of muscles, that is location. Where do they present? Skeletal muscles, location, closely associated with skeletal components of the body. Skeletal components of the body such as forelimbs, hind limbs, ribs, etc. Visceral muscles present in alimentary canal, reproductive tract, wall of blood vessels, urinary bladder, uterus in case of female. These structures show visceral muscles. Cardiac muscles present in heart. Heart wall is made of cardiac muscles. This is about location regarding the three types of muscles. Appearance of three types of muscles. What about their appearance? Skeletal muscles are striated muscles because they show striations, alternate dark and light bands due to regular arrangement of myofilaments called myosin filaments and actin filaments. Myosin filaments called thick filaments, actin filaments called thin filaments. As they show regular arrangement, they form alternate dark and light bands which form striations. So they are called striated muscles. In case of visceral muscles, the thick filaments and thin filaments are irregularly arranged. That is why they do not form striations. The alternate dark and light bands are not formed due to irregular arrangement of filaments. So these are known as non-striated muscles, also called smooth muscles. What about cardiac muscles? Cardiac muscles are also striated muscles just like skeletal muscles, because here also dark and light bands are seen due to regular arrangement of myofilaments. So in skeletal muscles and cardiac muscles, striations are seen due to regular arrangement of thick filaments and thin filaments, whereas in visceral muscles, irregular arrangement of thick and thin filaments causes smooth appearance, nothing but unstriated muscles. Next, control. Functionally, skeletal muscles are voluntary, whereas visceral muscles and cardiac muscles are involuntary. Skeletal muscles are under control of willpower of an individual. So that is said to be voluntary. What about function? Skeletal muscles play an important role in locomotion. They are primarily involved in locomotory actions and maintenance of body posture. Visceral muscles they help in passage of food through the digestive tract. Also involving movement of gametes through the genital tract. Smooth muscles present in the wall of the genital tract, that is why their contractions facilitate movement of gametes through the genital tract. Cardiac muscles, pumping of blood by heart. As the cardiac muscles present in wall of heart, their contractions facilitate pumping of blood. Next topic. Skeletal muscle. Out of 3 types of muscles in our body, this chapter, locomotion and movement, that is related to skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles present in our forelimbs, hind limbs, which play an important role in locomotion. So, the structure and function in this chapter related to which muscle? Skeletal muscle. Let us see the structure of skeletal muscle and mechanism of its contraction. This is example of skeletal muscle. This is the muscle, biceps muscle in our forelimb. Just we can see the important components in the skeletal muscle. For example, biceps muscle, let us take biceps muscle. This biceps muscle is composed of many bundles of muscle fibers called fascicles. In the biceps muscle, several muscle fascicles present. What is fascicle? Fascicle is a bundle of muscle fibers. In each muscle fascicle, number of muscle cells called muscle fibers. So, the muscle fascicle is composed of many muscle fibers or myocytes or muscle cells. Each muscle fiber is composed of parallelly arranged many myofibrils. This muscle fiber is composed of myofibrils. These myofibrils are parallelly arranged within the sarcoplasm of muscle fiber. Each myofibril is composed of mainly 2 types of myofilaments called thick filaments and thin filaments. Thick filaments are called myosin filaments and thin filaments are called actin filaments. As the thick filaments and thin filaments are regularly arranged, they form alternately arranged dark and light bands like this. To study the regular arrangement of actin and myosin filaments, we have to observe structure of myofibril. This is myofibril structure in relation to one sarcomere. A band, I band, I band, A band, I band, next A band, alternately arranged due to regular arrangement of thick filaments and thin filaments. This is the thick filament called myosin filament. This is thin filament called actin filament. Length of thick filament or myosin filament, that equals to length of A band. Then what about actin filaments? Actin filaments are seen in both I band and A band. In the center of A band, this is center of A band, there is no actin filament. That zone is said to be H zone. So you can see in H zone, only myosin filaments are seen, but no actin filaments in H zone, which lies in the center of A band. In the center of H zone, there is a line called M line. This is M line. So what is the position of M line? In the center of H zone. Also we can say in the center of A band. H zone is in the center of A band. M line is in the center of H zone. I band is bisected by Z line. In I band, we can see only actin filaments, no myosin filaments in I band. These actin filaments extend from Z line of I band into A band up to some extent. The zone where the thick filament and thin filament are overlapped, this region, from this region to this region, this is considered as overlapping zone. The thick and thin filaments are overlapped in some portions of A band. At edges of A band, at this edge and at this edge, we can see overlapping of thick filaments and thin filaments. So overlapping of thick and thin filaments cannot be seen in the H zone because where there is only myosin filament. In case of I band, there is no overlapping of myosin and actin filaments because in I band no myosin filaments. So we can see overlapping of filaments in only ends of A band. This end and this end of A band we can see overlapping. During contraction of muscle, as actin filaments slide over myosin filaments, these actin filaments slide over myosin filaments towards the center of A band. That is why overlapping region of A band increases during contraction. So overlapping region of A band increases during contraction. What about H zone? Due to that increased overlapping region, the size of H zone decreases due to increased overlapping region during contraction. As actin filaments, they slide over myosin filaments along with Z line towards A band. As a result, during contraction, the length of I band also decreases. But there is no any change in the length of A band because the length of myosin filament remains same during contraction. That is why the length of A band also remains same, but which regions change in their size during contraction. During muscle contraction, the length of A band remains same, overlapping region increases, H zone decreases, I band decreases. During contraction, as actin filaments slide over myosin filaments towards the center of A band, along with Z lines on both sides, the length of sarcomere also decreases. But there is no change in the length of filaments. No change in the length of actin filament or myosin filament. Actin filaments change in their place during contraction, but they do not undergo any change in their length. So, length of myosin filament and actin filaments remains same, but overlapping region increases. During contraction, as adjacent sarcomeres, this is one sarcomere which is considered as functional unit of contraction. What is the functional unit of contraction? Sarcomere. Adjacent sarcomeres contract at a time. As a result, the total length of myofibril also decreases. That is why when we observe our biceps muscle, when this muscle remains in relaxed state, there is a normal length. When the biceps muscle contracts, the length of the biceps muscle decreases. Why? Because the length of biceps muscle decreases during contraction because the muscle fibers inside the muscle, myofibrils inside the muscle fibers, and sarcomeres length, all these decrease. That is why the total muscle's length decreases during contraction. Thin filaments, actin filament. Each actin filament is made of three types of proteins called troponin, tropomyosin and actin proteins. Actin proteins, how do they arrange? These actin proteins form two polymeric filamentous proteins. This is one F-actin, F refers filamentous. Just like a filament, one F-actin, this is one F-actin, this is another F-actin. There are two F-actins in thin filament. Each F-actin, F refers filamentous, so each F-actin is polymer. Each F-actin is composed of many monomeric G-actins. This is a G-actin, this is another G-actin. G-actins are monomeric, whereas F-actin is polymeric. So in the thin filament, how many F-actins? There are two F-actins, filamentous actins. F-actins are polymeric. Each F-actin is composed of many monomeric G-actins. Actin proteins in actin filament have active sites. To these active sites of actin proteins, myosin heads of myosin filaments bind during contraction. So here the question can be given, active sites are located on thin filament or thick filament? Answer is thin filaments. Right. The protein called troponin. Troponin proteins, these are the troponin proteins. Each troponin is a complex protein because it is composed of three subunits. What are the three subunits in the troponin? Troponin is composed of three subunits called TNC, TNT and TNI. TNC, C refers calcium, T refers tropomyosin, I refers inhibitory subunit. To the TNC subunit, calcium ions bind to facilitate muscle contraction. The subunit TNT, this TNT subunit of troponin binds to tropomyosin. That is why that subunit, the subunit inhibitory subunit, the TNI of troponin inhibits binding of myosin head during resting state. When the muscle is in resting state, the active sites of actin filaments are masked due to the influence of TNI. That is troponin. Next protein, tropomyosin. Tropomyosin is present in the form of two filaments. These two filaments of tropomyosin are present along the length of two F-actins. That is why in each thin filament there are two F-actins, there are two filamentous tropomyosin and many regularly arranged troponin proteins with a regular distance. With regular intervals, the troponin proteins are present along the length of tropomyosin of thin filament. Thick filaments, nothing but myosin filaments. Each thick filament is composed of many monomeric meromyosins. Meromyosin is monomer. Each monomeric meromyosin has head, neck and tail. Neck also called short arm. This short arm and head together called cross arm. So cross arm includes both head and neck region. This cross arm, also called heavy meromyosin, HMM. Heavy meromyosin, HMM, that includes both head and neck, which are in the form of cross arm. Next, tail region. Tail region, also called light meromyosin, LMM. Light meromyosin of meromyosin, that is in the form of tail. So HMM and LMM both are the two regions in each meromyosin. This is structure of meromyosin of thick filament. Mechanism of muscle contraction. You know, skeletal muscles are under control of SNS, somatic neural system. For the activation of skeletal muscle fiber, motor impulse should reach to the neuromuscular junction through motor neuron. This is motor neuron through which motor impulse from CNS reach to neuromuscular junction. Once the impulse reach to synaptic knobs, the neurotransmitter called acetylcholine is released into neuromuscular junction. Then this acetylcholine binds with chemoreceptors which present on sarcolemma. As a result, sarcolemma gets depolarized. Depolarization of sarcolemma causes generation of action potentials. Once action potentials are generated in the sarcolemma, due to those action potentials, the terminal cisternae release calcium ions into sarcoplasm. Once the calcium ions are released into sarcoplasm freely, these calcium ions bind with TNC subunit of troponin. As a result, troponin calcium complex is formed. The troponin calcium complex facilitates unmasking of active sites. Once the active sites of thin filaments are unmasked, the heads of myosin bind with unmasked active sites to form as cross bridges. Once ATP is hydrolyzed, inorganic phosphate and ADP molecules are there in the myosin head. By using this hydrolyzed ATP, myosin heads bind with active sites to form as cross bridge between actin filament and myosin filament. Formation of cross bridge facilitates sliding of actin filaments over myosin filament. That sliding of actin filament over myosin filament towards center of A band, that is nothing but power stroke. So sliding or rotation during power stroke is followed by release of ADP and PI from the head of myosin, followed by binding of new ATP molecule with the pocket of myosin head. Once new ATP binds with myosin head, the myosin heads detach from active sites. That is nothing but breakdown of cross bridges. Once the cross bridges are broken, again this ATP is hydrolyzed in the myosin head. As a result, inorganic phosphate and ADP again formed in the myosin head. Again, this myosin head, which contains inorganic phosphate and ADP, binds with next active site to cause formation of cross bridge. All these events are repeated as long as action potentials reach to neuromuscular junction. Once the nerve impulse stops to neuromuscular junction, muscle enters into relaxed state. As there is no action potential to neuromuscular junction, what happens? Calcium ions are pumped back into terminal cisternae. As a result, the active sites are again masked. Once active sites are masked, all the cross bridges are broken. As all cross bridges are broken, the actin filaments go back to their original position along with the Z lines. That is nothing but muscle relaxation. This is mechanism of muscle contraction and muscle relaxation. Next topic, difference between red muscle fibers and white muscle fibers. Red muscle fibers. Red muscle fibers are described as slowly contracting fibers, and these are oxidative fibers because red muscle fibers, they show aerobic metabolism as they contain more amount of myoglobin as well as more number of mitochondria. These are described as oxidative fibers. They show slow contraction. They appear in red in color due to presence of more amount of myoglobin. White muscle fibers, they contain relatively less amount of myoglobin. So these are white or pale, and these are fast contracting muscle fibers. These are described as glycolytic muscle fibers. When we consider myoglobin content, just we have discussed, the red muscle fibers contain more amount of myoglobin, whereas white muscle fibers less amount of myoglobin. What about color of red muscle fibers? These are red, and white muscle fibers white or pale. Number of mitochondria in red muscle fibers more in number, whereas in white muscle fibers fewer in number. Method of ATP generation. In case of red muscle fibers, aerobic cellular respiration. In white muscle fibers, anaerobic cellular respiration. Amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum nothing but endoplasmic reticulum in sarcocytes. Amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum in red muscle fibers is less. The amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum in white muscle fibers. Amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum in red muscle fibers less in amount, whereas in white muscle fibers more in amount. Contraction velocity. Red muscle fibers show slow contraction but prolonged contraction. Red muscle fibers exhibit slow contraction but prolonged contraction, that is a long-term contraction. They show low intensity. Red muscle fibers contract with low intensity, prolonged contraction, slow contraction. Whereas white muscle fibers, they show fast contraction but short-term contraction with a high intensity. What about fatigue? Red muscle fibers, they show low fatigue, whereas white muscle fibers show high fatigue. Skeletal system, which includes 206 bones and a few cartilages. All the bones in our body can be divided into two divisions. What are the two divisions? Axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton includes 80 bones. Appendicular skeleton includes remaining 126 bones. Total 206 bones. Axial skeleton includes which structures? You can observe in the anterior view of the body and the posterior view of the body. Anterior view, nothing but our ventral side. Posterior view, nothing but our dorsal side. In these figures, you can see the dark portions come under axial skeleton. These dark portions include skull, vertebral column, sternum, and ribs. Skull, then vertebral column, sternum, and ribs constitute axial skeleton. Then what about appendicular skeleton? Appendicular skeleton includes pectoral girdle bones, These pectoral girdle bones, how many? Each half of the pectoral girdle is composed of two bones called scapula and clavicle. So, there are two clavicles and two scapula. Total pectoral girdle includes total 4 bones. The bones in each forelimb, this is forelimb, each forelimb is composed of 30 bones. So total, both forelimbs include 30 plus 30, total 60 bones. Come to pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle, each half of the pelvic girdle is composed of single bone. So this is one single bone called coxal bone. This is another single bone called coxal bone. So there are two coxal bones. So number of bones in pelvic girdle, 2 bones. Number of bones in pectoral girdle, 4 bones. Number of bones in pelvic girdle, 2 bones. And bones in each hind limb, 30 bones. So total number of bones in both hind limbs, 60. 4, 60, 2, 60. Total 120 plus 6, 126. Total 126 bones are included under appendicular skeleton. So total number of bones in appendicular skeleton 126. Total number of bones in axial skeleton 80. What are the 80 bones in axial skeleton? 80 bones in axial skeleton include 22 bones in skull, 6 ear ossicles, 1 hyoid bone. All these are the bones in our head region. Mainly, the skull is made of 22 bones, which include 8 cranial bones and 14 facial bones. These are the main 2 sets of bones that involve in the formation of skull. In addition to these 22 bones, 6 ear ossicles also present in our head region. What about hyoid bone? This is the hyoid bone. It is U-shaped bone present at the base of buccal cavity. This hyoid bone does not articulate with any other bone in our endoskeleton. It is the only bone that doesn't articulate with any other bone in our endoskeleton. What is its location? At the base of buccal cavity. What is the shape of hyoid bone? U-shaped bone. So these are the various bones in head region. Next, vertebral column. There are 26 bones in our vertebral column. Sternum, there is single bone in the form of sternum. Ribs, there are 24 bones in the form of 12 pairs. So total 24 ribs. So total number of bones 22 plus 6, 28. Then hyoid bone 29. 29 plus 1 sternum 30. 30 plus 26 vertebrae 56. 56 plus 24 ribs 56. 76. Then total bones in axial skeleton 80 bones. Let us consider skull. In our skull, 2 sets of bones, 8 cranial bones and 14 facial bones. What are the 8 cranial bones? 1 frontal bone, 2 parietal bones, 2 temporal bones, 1 occipital bone, 1 sphenoid bone and 1 ethmoid bone. Total 8 cranial bones. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8. These 8 cranial bones are articulated with the fibrous connective tissue. This fibrous connective tissue is in the form of sutures. These sutures among cranial bones are the examples of immovable joints in our endoskeleton. Sphenoid bone. This sphenoid bone is described as keystone bone. This is keystone bone. Because, what is the reason to call the sphenoid bone as keystone bone? Keystone bone is the bone that articulates with all other bones of our cranium. So it is called keystone bone. So these are the total 8 cranial bones. Occipital bone has 2 occipital condyles. As occipital bone has 2 occipital condyles, to which the first cervical vertebra called atlas articulates. What is the reason to call our skull as dicondyle skull? The skull has two occipital condyles. Right. Let us take facial bones. What are the facial bones? There are 14 facial bones. 2 lacrimal bones, 2 nasal bones, 2 zygomatic bones or cheek bones, 2 maxillary bones which form upper jaw, 1 mandible that forms 2 maxillary bones form upper jaw and 1 mandible that forms lower jaw. And there are 2 bones called inferior nasal concave and there is single bone called vomer and 2 palatine bones. These bones also come under facial bones. These facial bones form front part of our head. Next, vertebral column. Vertebral column includes total 26 vertebrae. These 26 vertebrae are in the form of 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, 1 sacrum and 1 coccyx. Among cervical vertebrae, most of mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. There are few exceptions in mammals. Most of mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae. In our neck region also 7 cervical vertebrae. The first cervical vertebrae is called atlas. The second cervical vertebrae is called axis. First cervical vertebra called atlas articulates with occipital condyles of occipital bone of our cranium. Right. Thoracic vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae. These thoracic vertebrae provide surface for attachment of the dorsal ends of ribs. And lumbar vertebrae. These lumbar vertebrae are the strongest vertebrae in our vertebral column. There are 5 lumbar vertebrae and sacrum. This is the sacrum is a compound bone. The sacrum is formed by the fusion of 5 sacral vertebrae. These 5 sacral vertebrae and 4 caudal vertebrae which are seen in the embryos. So in adult endoskeleton, total number of vertebrae 26. What are the 26 vertebrae in our vertebral column? 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 1 sacrum, 1 coccyx, total 26. Whereas if the question is given, how many vertebrae are seen in human embryo? Answer is 33 vertebrae. See, in our vertebral column, a typical vertebra has mainly 2 portions, that is ventral portion, nothing but anterior portion, and dorsolateral portion. That ventral portion is called centrum, also called vertebral body. This is centrum, also called vertebral body. It lies on ventral side, that is anterior portion of the vertebra. This vertebral arch or neural arch that surrounds a canal that is called vertebral canal. Through that vertebral canal, spinal cord passes. Between the center of 2 vertebrae, centrum nothing but vertebral body. Between the center of 2 successive vertebrae, there is intervertebral disc. This is intervertebral disc between 2 center of successive vertebrae. Next, ribs. Sternum, you know, there is a single flat bone called sternum. This sternum has upper region called manubrium, a large portion called body, and a distal portion called xiphoid process. The sternum is a flat bone. It provides surfaces for attachment of abdominal muscles and also provides surface for attachment of the ventral ends of ribs, that is sternum. What about ribs? 12 pairs of ribs. These ribs show dorsal ends that articulate with vertebral column called thoracic vertebrae, and ventral ends of ribs articulate with sternum. Not all ribs articulate with sternum ventrally, but all ribs articulate with thoracic vertebrae dorsally. Okay, the first 7 pairs of ribs articulate with sternum, so these first 7 pairs of ribs are called true ribs. As the true ribs, first 7 pairs of ribs articulate with the vertebral column as well as sternum, so these are also called vertebrosternal ribs. Vertebrosternal ribs. How many vertebrosternal ribs? First 7 pairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. First 7 pairs of ribs are called true ribs because all of them articulate with sternum. Hence, these are considered as true ribs. And how many true ribs or vertebrosternal ribs? 7 pairs. Next ribs, 8th pair, 9th pair and 10th pair. These 3 pairs of ribs do not articulate with sternum directly. Their costal cartilages, the costal cartilages of first 7 pairs directly articulate with sternum, whereas the costal cartilages of 8th pair, 9th pair and 10th pair, they do not articulate with the sternum directly. All these 3 pairs articulate with the costal cartilage of the 7th pair collectively. That is why these 3 pairs of ribs are called vertebrochondral ribs. The vertebrochondral ribs, the name is given because their dorsal ends attach with vertebral column dorsally and their ventral ends attach with the costal cartilage of the 7th pair of ribs. Hence the name is given vertebrochondral ribs. These vertebrochondral ribs are also considered as false ribs because these ribs do not articulate with sternum directly. So, ribs that do not articulate with sternum directly, such ribs are described as false ribs. So, vertebrochondral ribs are the false ribs. What about last 2 pairs of ribs? 11th pair and 12th pair. Their dorsal ends articulate with vertebral column, but their ventral ends do not articulate with 7th pair or sternum, whatever. So their ventral ends are totally free. This is the ventral end of the 11th pair. This is the ventral end of the 12th pair. So the ventral ends of the 11th and 12th pairs of ribs are totally free. So these last 2 pairs are called floating ribs, also called vertebral ribs. The floating ribs are also called vertebral ribs because their dorsal ends attach with vertebral column. Right. These floating ribs, as they do not articulate with sternum, these are also considered as false ribs. So first 7 pairs of ribs are true ribs. The remaining last 5 pairs of ribs are considered as false ribs. Okay. The size of ribs gradually increases from first pair to 7th pair. That is why which ribs are smallest ribs? Answer is first pair of ribs are smallest ribs. Which ribs are largest ribs? 7th pair of ribs are considered as largest ribs. So this is about ribs. Come to appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton includes pectoral girdle bones, pelvic girdle bones, bones of forelimbs and bones of hind limbs. Each of our pectoral girdle has 2 bones called a triangle shaped blade like bone called scapula and a slender bone called clavicle, also called collar bone. This is scapula. The scapula is a shoulder blade. It is triangular in shape. It lies on dorsal side and the scapula extends between 2nd and 7th ribs. And on the dorsal side of the scapula, there is an elevated ridge. This elevated ridge, nothing but spine. This elevated ridge on dorsal surface of the scapula, that is known as a spine, it shows a process. That process is called acromion process. To this acromion process, one end of the clavicle or collarbone attaches. The one end of clavicle articulates with the acromion process of the scapula. The other end of the clavicle articulates with the manubrium of the sternum. So this is the acromion process of the scapula. Above the acromion process, there is a process called coracoid process. Below the acromion process, there is a cavity called glenoid cavity. Into this glenoid cavity, the ball-like head of humerus fits to form as a joint called ball and socket joint. So ball and socket joint in our shoulder region lies between the glenoid cavity of scapula and ball-like head of humerus. This is the structure of scapula. This is a collarbone called clavicle. The scapula and clavicle both come under half of the pectoral girdle. Next, bones of forelimb. In each forelimb, there are 30 bones. What are the 30 bones in our forelimb? There is one bone in upper arm, that is humerus. There are two bones in the forearm called radius and ulna. This is a radius, ulna. Next, in the wrist, in wrist region, there are 8 small bones called carpals. How many carpals? 8. After wrist, there is palm. How many palm bones? There are 5 palm bones, followed by bones of digits. In fingers, how many bones? There are 14 bones in our digits called phalanges. In first finger, 2 phalanges are there, and in remaining 3 phalanges in each. So here 12 bones, here 2 bones. Total 14 bones in fingers in each forelimb. So number of phalanges in each forelimb, 14. So total number of bones in forelimb, humerus 1, radius 1, ulna 1, carpals 8, metacarpals 5, phalanges 14. 14, 19, 27, 28, 29, 30. 30 bones in each forelimb. So total number of bones in both forelimbs, 60 bones. Next, pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle is composed of 2 bones called coxal bones, also called hip bones. Each coxal bone is a compound bone because it is formed by the fusion of 3 bones called ilium, ischium and pubis. You can see in the figure, this is a coxal bone. This coxal bone is a compound bone because it is formed by the fusion of 3 bones called, this is the bone called ilium. This is a ilium. This is a bone called pubis. This is a bone called ischium. Ilium, ischium and pubis, these 3 bones are fused to form as a single bone called coxal bone or hip bone. The 2 coxal bones are articulated ventrally by pubic symphysis. This is pubic symphysis. This pubic symphysis is an example of cartilaginous joint. The pubic symphysis is an example of cartilaginous joint. It allows a limited movement of the 2 coxal bones. So cartilaginous joints allow limited movement only. These pubic symphysis is present on the ventral side of the pelvic girdle. Dorsally, the ilium, this is the ilium of coxal bone. Dorsally it articulates with the sacrum by a joint called sacroiliac joint. This is a sacroiliac joint that lies between sacrum and ilium of coxal bone. That joint is present towards dorsal side, that is nothing but posterior side. So this is a pelvic girdle. At the junction of three bones, ilium, ischium and pubis, there is a cavity called acetabulum. Acetabulum is the cavity that lies at the junction of ilium, ischium and pubis. Into this acetabulum, the ball-like head of femur. Femur, you know, femur is the thigh bone. The ball-like head of femur fits into this acetabulum to form as ball and socket joint. So what are the examples of ball and socket joints? The common examples are shoulder joint that lies between the pectoral girdle and humerus, and hip joint that lies between pelvic girdle and femur. So this is the acetabulum in the coxal bone. Right. This is a wide foramen is there that is called obturator foramen. This obturator foramen is the foramen in the pelvic girdle. These are the bones of hind limb. Each hind limb has 30 bones. What are 30 bones present in our each hind limb? One femur. This is a patella, that is a kneecap bone. One kneecap bone that is present on front side. Tibia, one fibula and ankle bones. How many ankle bones in each hind limb? There are 7 ankle bones. Metatarsals, there are 5 metatarsals, and phalanges, 14 phalanges. Total, one femur, that is a thigh bone. Patella, that is one patella. Patella is an example of sesamoid bone. This patella is a kneecap bone. Then one tibia, one fibula. The tibia is a thick bone in this region, that is weight bearing bone. A thin bone, that is a fibula. What are the small bones present in our ankle region? Those are called tarsals. How many tarsals in each hind limb? Only 7. Whereas, how many carpals in each forelimb? 8 carpals in each forelimb. Next, in instep region, what are the bones? Metatarsals. How many metatarsals in instep? 5 metatarsals. Phalanges, nothing but bones in the toes. 14 phalanges. So total 30. 2, 4, 4 plus 7, 11, 11 plus 5, 16, 16 plus 14, 30 bones. Total 30 bones in each hind limbs. This is about bones in hind limb. Next, joints. Joint is the articulation between two bones or articulation between bone and cartilage. Joints are essential for the movement of certain body parts, particularly our forelimbs and hind limbs. Can we expect the movement of bones in our forelimbs and hind limbs without joints? Such joints in our body can be divided into 3 types. What are the 3 types of joints structurally? Fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, synovial joints. Fibrous joints. The name fibrous joint is given because between the 2 articulated bones, the entire space is filled with dense fibrous connective tissue. That is why the 2 bones cannot show any movement, as the entire space is filled with fibrous connective tissue. Hence the name is given fibrous joints. The 2 articulated bones fuse end to end with the help of dense fibrous connective tissue. These fibrous joints do not allow any movement. They do not allow any movement as the space is completely filled with fibrous connective tissue. Cartilaginous joints. Between 2 articulated bones, the space is filled with cartilage. So, the cartilage is there between the 2 articulated bones, hence the name is given cartilaginous joint. These cartilaginous joints allow only limited movement, not a free movement. The cartilaginous joints, bones are joined together with the help of cartilages. They permit only limited movements. What about synovial joints? Between the two articulated bones, there is a cavity called synovial cavity. That synovial cavity is filled with synovial fluid. That synovial fluid acts as lubricant during the movement of the bones. Fluid-filled synovial cavity is there between the two articulated bones, and these joints allow considerable movements, nothing but free movements. What are the various examples of three types of joints? Fibrous joints, sutures of cranium. Already we have discussed in our cranium, sutures do not allow any movement of cranial bones. These sutures are the examples of fibrous joints. Cartilaginous joints. Just now we have discussed about cartilaginous joints. Those are intervertebral disc lies between center of two successive vertebrae, and pubic symphysis that lies between two coxal bones of the pelvic girdle. These are the examples of cartilaginous joints. So joint between adjacent vertebrae in the vertebral column, that is in the form of intervertebral disc. Pubic symphysis is also example of cartilaginous joints. Synovial joints. There are different types of synovial joints in our body. All these synovial joints are freely movable joints. These are ball and socket joint, hinge joint, pivot joint, gliding joint, saddle joint. In addition to these, condyloid joint is also there in our endoskeleton. That condyloid joint also comes under synovial joints. Ball and socket joint, example, shoulder joint as well as hip joint. Both come under ball and socket joint. Hinge joint. What are the examples of hinge joint? Hinge joints are seen at elbow. Elbow joint is a hinge joint. Then knee joint. The knee joint is also a type of hinge joint. Joints among phalanges. Joints among phalanges also come under hinge joints. Pivot joint. Pivot joint lies between atlas and axis. So atlantoaxial joint in our neck region comes under pivot joint. Gliding joint. Gliding joints present among carpals, nothing but wrist bones. Among wrist bones or carpals, we can see gliding joint. Saddle joint. Saddle joint lies between metacarpal of thumb and carpal. The joint that lies between carpal and metacarpal of thumb, the saddle joint is present. So these are the examples of synovial joints. So here also, very repeated question in NEET entrance examination on joints, regarding the types of joints, examples, their locations, etc. The last topic is disorders of muscular and skeletal system. What are the various common disorders in our musculoskeletal system? Myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis, it is an example of autoimmune disorder. What is myasthenia gravis? In this disorder, neuromuscular junction lies between motor neuron and muscle fiber. These neuromuscular junctions are damaged in this disorder. As a result, what are the complications develop in the body? Affecting neuromuscular junction leading to fatigue at a neuromuscular junction, weakening and paralysis of skeletal muscle. Muscular dystrophy. What is muscular dystrophy? Muscular dystrophy is the progressive degeneration of skeletal muscles. Progressive degeneration of skeletal muscles is a main symptom of muscular dystrophy. The most common reason for muscular dystrophy, genetic defects. Next disorder, tetany. Tetany is nothing but rapid spasms, also called wild contractions. Wild contractions in muscle, that is because of low calcium levels in blood. that is body fluid. The common reason for such a disorder, hypoparathyroidism, that is a deficiency of parathyroid hormone. Deficiency of parathyroid hormone, also called hypoparathyroidism, leads to hypocalcemia. Hypocalcemia, nothing but low levels of calcium in blood. This hypocalcemia leads to the disorder called tetany. What is the main manifestation in tetany? Rapid spasms, wild contractions. Rapid spasms are nothing but wild contractions. Arthritis. What about arthritis? Arthritis is nothing but inflammation of joints. Arthritis, there is autoimmune disorder, that is rheumatoid arthritis. You know, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis are the two forms of arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is an example of autoimmune disorder. So, myasthenia gravis and rheumatoid arthritis are the examples of autoimmune disorders. In arthritis, what is the main symptom? Inflammation of joint. Osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is age-related disorder. Osteoporosis is an age-related disorder in which decreased bone mass. Bone mass is decreased and increased chances of bone fractures. Chances of bone fractures increased due to decreased bone mass. It is very common when compared to males. It is common in females because in postmenopause women, osteoporosis is more common when compared to men. That is because of in postmenopause women, the estrogen levels decrease. As a result, osteoporosis is common in postmenopause women. So, commonly due to decreased levels of estrogen. So, here, what is the importance of estrogen in maintaining bone mass? Estrogen plays an important role in activation of osteoblasts for mineralization of bone. In postmenopause women, as the levels of estrogen decrease, then the mineralization of bone also decreases. That leads to osteoporosis. So that is a relation between levels of estrogen and bone mass. Another disorder, that is gout. What is the symptom of gout? Gout is nothing but inflammation of joints. Inflammation of joints seen in both arthritis as well as gout, but reasons are different. There is inflammation in the synovial membrane in the joints due to autoimmune disorder in case of rheumatoid arthritis. That leads to severe joint pains at the joints in the form of inflammation, whereas in gout, inflammation of joint is because of accumulation of uric acid crystals. Then what about previous year questions in NEET entrance examination in this chapter? NEET 2023, then you can see the question in the chapter. Which of the following statements are correct regarding skeletal muscle? While reading the question or option, you must select the key terms. When you select the key terms in question or in statement, you can avoid mistakes. You can do all questions, but you must take care while reading the question and options. Okay. Muscle bundles held together by collagenous connective tissue layer called fascicle. This is wrong statement because fascicle is not the layer. Fascicle is the bundle of muscle fibers. But what about that layer? Muscle bundles are held together by collagenous connective tissue layer called fascia, but not fascicle. So, here the layer is known as fascia, not fascicle. So the statement is wrong. Sarcoplasmic reticulum of muscle fiber is a storehouse of calcium ions. That is right. So this statement is true. Calcium ions are stored in sarcoplasmic reticulum. The part of sarcoplasmic reticulum, that is cisterna. Those cisternae store calcium ions, so it is correct statement. Striated appearance of skeletal muscle fiber is due to distribution pattern of actin and myosin proteins. That is correct. The striated appearance, that is due to the regular arrangement of actin and myosin proteins, nothing but filaments. So the distribution pattern of actin and myosin proteins is responsible for formation of striations. That is correct. M line is present at the center of A band. H zone is present at the center of A band, and in the center of H zone there is a line called M line. M line is considered as functional unit of contraction called sarcomere. It is wrong, because sarcomere is a functional unit of contraction but not M line. M line is not the functional unit of contraction. So it is wrongly given statement. Choose the most appropriate answer from the options given below. So the correct statements are B and C. Fourth one is the correct option. Next question. In re-examination 2024, in NEET entrance examination, there was question in the chapter, select the correct statement regarding mechanism of muscle contraction. Correct statement regarding mechanism of muscle contraction. It is initiated by a signal sent by CNS via sensory neuron. We have discussed in the activation of muscle fiber, motor impulse reach to neuromuscular junction through motor neuron, but not through sensory neuron. Sensory neuron carries sensory impulse from receptor to CNS, whereas motor neuron carries motor impulse from CNS to effector. So this statement is, it is initiated by a signal sent by CNS via sensory neuron. It is wrong. Neurotransmitter generates action potential in the sarcolemma. It is correct. When neurotransmitter binds with chemoreceptors of sarcolemma, it causes depolarization of sarcolemma, that is responsible for generation of action potential. Next statement. Increased calcium levels leads to the binding of calcium with troponin on actin filaments. When calcium levels increase in the sarcoplasm due to activation of the muscle fiber, these free calcium ions bind with TNC of troponin protein on the actin filaments. So this statement is true. Masking of active sites for actin is activated. For mechanism of muscle contraction, active sites should be unmasked, should not be masked. So here the statement is given, correct statement regarding mechanism of muscle contraction. Masking of active sites for actin is activated. That is wrong, because active sites should be unmasked. So this is wrong. Utilizing the energy from ATP hydrolysis to form cross bridge. Yes. Without hydrolysis of ATP, there is no formation of cross bridge. In the mechanism of muscle contraction, we have discussed the cross bridges are formed by using energy from hydrolyzed ATP. So this is true. Choose the most appropriate answer from the options given below. So which statements are true? B, C and E. B, C and E is the correct option. This is a question. NEET 2023. This is about a skeleton, endoskeleton. In the matching model, you can see palm bones, wrist bones, ankle bones, digit bones, phalanges, metacarpals, carpals, tarsals. Here you have to match the two lists. Palm bones are seen in metacarpals, that is A, 2. Next, wrist bones. Wrist bones called carpals. Ankle bones called tarsals. Digit bones called phalanges. 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1. This is a correct option. This is another question in endoskeleton. In 2020, floating ribs, acromia, scapula, glenoid cavity. Second column, located between second and seventh ribs, head of the humerus, clavicle, do not connect with the sternum. Floating ribs do not connect with sternum. Acromion, one end of the clavicle articulates with the acromion process of scapula. Scapula is located between second and seventh ribs. That is a position of the scapula. Glenoid cavity, in which head of humerus fits to form as ball and socket joint. So here the correct option is 4, 3, 1, 2. 4, 3, 1, 2. Next question. Location of joint, type of joint. Joint between humerus and pectoral girdle. Joint between humerus and pectoral girdle, that is ball and socket joint. Knee joint. Knee joint is an example of hinge joint. Knee joint, elbow joint, joint among the phalanges come under hinge joints. Joint between atlas and axis in neck region, that is pivot joint. Joint between carpals, that is gliding joint. In re-examination 2024, it was a question on joints. So the answer is 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. This is a correct option. Next question. There is another question regarding the joints. Public NEET entrance 2024. This question was also matching model in joints. Fibrous joints. If you learn these joints and examples clearly, you can answer any model question. You can observe all these questions are almost similar, same questions repeated several times in public NEET entrance exam. Fibrous joints. Fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, hinge joints, ball and socket joints. Adjacent vertebrae, limited movement, that is cartilaginous joint. Adjacent vertebrae, limited movement, that is intervertebral disc. Next, fibrous joints. What about fibrous joints? Fibrous joints, skull do not allow any movement. Fibrous joints. These fibrous joints, example sutures among the cranial bones in skull, they do not allow any movement. Hinge joint, knee joint helps in locomotion. Knee joint. Ball and socket joint, humerus and pectoral girdle. So answer is 3, 1, 3, 1, 4, 2. 3, 1, 4, 2. Correct option. Another question. NEET 2023. Almost same question. Public NEET entrance examination 2023, almost same question. Based on the joints. Here also cartilaginous joint, ball and socket joint, fibrous joint, saddle joint. You know saddle joint lies between carpal and metacarpal of thumb. Between carpal and metacarpal of thumb. Saddle joint. Fibrous joint. Flat bones of skull. The flat bones of skull, cranial bones are the examples of flat bones. So the fibrous joint, ball and socket joint between the humerus and pectoral girdle, then cartilaginous joint between adjacent vertebrae in the vertebral column. So correct answer is 2, 4, 2, 4, 1, 3. 2, 4, 1, 3. Correct option. Next question is, which of the following are autoimmune disorders? 2024 public NEET entrance examination question it is. Autoimmune disorders. We have to select only autoimmune disorders. Myasthenia gravis, autoimmune disorder. Rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune disorder. Gout, it is due to accumulation of uric acid crystals, not due to autoimmune disorder. Muscular dystrophy, commonly due to genetic disorders, not due to autoimmune disorder. Systemic lupus erythematosus, is also an example of autoimmune disorder. What is systemic lupus erythematosus? It is characterized by damaging skin, kidneys, joints, heart, etc. Several body parts are affected in this autoimmune disorder, that is systemic lupus erythematosus. Systemic means all over the body. Localized means that is confined to a specific site of the body. So it is the systemic lupus erythematosus in which skin, heart, joints, kidneys, etc. are damaged. It is also an example of autoimmune disorder. So answer is A, B and E. A, B and E is the correct option. There was question in NEET 2022 in the form of assertion reason question. Given below are two statements, one is labeled as assertion, another one is labeled as reason. What about assertion? Osteoporosis is characterized by decreased bone mass. That is correct. We have discussed the symptoms of osteoporosis, that is age-related disorder. Bone mass is decreased in osteoporosis and increased chances of bone fractures. So this statement is true. Reason: common cause of osteoporosis is increased levels of estrogen. It is wrong. What is the common cause of osteoporosis? Decreased levels of estrogen, but not increased levels of estrogen. So this statement is wrong. In the light of above statements, Choose the appropriate answer from the options given below. So, assertion is true, reason is false. A is correct, but R is not correct. Second option is the correct option. These are the previous year questions in locomotion and movement. Thank you one and all. Wish you all the best.